Hello, today I'm going to be talking about some spoiler-filled thoughts that I had after rereading for the billionth time or something. No, it's only been like 3 reads. The Way of Kings. Key phrase there is spoiler-filled. If you have not yet read The Way of Kings, you have been warned. There will be spoilers, and let's get into it. Now, I think Shallon's role in the book is very important. There are a couple of things that it does to elevate the story. First of all, it brings some levity and some variety. I mean, Adolin and Dalnar's part in the book is pretty intense and action-heavy. Kaladin's can be downright depressing, and then Shallon's sort of balances out a little bit and can be a lot lighter. And next off, it has some important character development with Shallon and Yasna. More so showing us who Yasna is, but really developing Shallon as a character a lot more. Obviously this is the first book, so we have to set up a lot of things, or Brandon Sanderson has to set up a lot of things. But yeah, I think he did a pretty good job setting up Shallon. And then this book also is this part in the book is also pretty important for some topics that Sanderson is focusing on. For example, what is right versus what is wrong is explored with Yasna's lesson to Shallon, and it's an interesting contrast compared to where Yasna thinks that ultimately what is right is whatever does the most good, versus Dalinar at the end of the book saying, what is a man's life worth? It's priceless. So there are two different approaches to the same question in a certain way. For one trying to say every life is important, the other one saying do whatever brings the most good. So I think that is a topic that Sanderson definitely explores in this series. And I think Shallon's part in this very first book does a good job talking about that, especially with the Soulcaster, and is it right to steal the Soulcaster if you're stealing it from this wealthy Light Eyes, who can easily get another, but at the same time you're doing it to save your family. So yeah, I think Shallon has an important role in exploring some topics. Lastly, setup. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about what this is setting up, but there are definitely a lot of important things done in this book that will mainly the Voidbringers being the Parshmen, that happens later, and just Shallon becoming Yasna's ward and betrothed to Adolin is important as well. So overall, I enjoy Shallon's part. I think it's pretty well done. I think there are some parts that could be cut down a little bit. Not necessarily fluff, but could be condensed a little bit. So those are my thoughts on Shallon's part. Let's get on to Kaladin's. As far as Kaladin's part goes, Kaladin is an amazingly well-written character and an amazing character. I mean, he has a great arc going from a beaten-down slave to a hero who saved the High Prince and is now part of his guard. Kaladin, is, what was I saying? He's a great example of a character with depression, and it's written really, really well. Also, I feel like his perspective, like reading from his perspective versus reading from Shallon's perspective, you're going to see a huge difference in what they think about and the way they think. And I think that Sanderson, again, just did a really good job with that. Kaladin's story itself is pretty interesting, pretty engaging. There's a good amount of action, but also a good amount of thoughtfulness. And, yeah, again, where, like, Kaladin's main thing is protecting people, and it's interesting how, like, he keeps coming back to that, even after he's been hurt, even after his trust has been broken, he's been betrayed, he keeps fighting to protect people. Why? Because he thinks it's right. And I think that's a huge thing explored in these books, is like the way, the things some people, good people, will do to protect what they think is right, or to do what they think is right. And I think Kaladin is a great example of that, especially in this book. He's really well written, he's really fun to read about, and he's inspiring to read about. Fun isn't the right word, more inspiring. He has an engaging story, and especially towards the end of the book, I think it's really well done. So those are my sort of jumbled thoughts on Kaladin. Let's move on to Dalinar and Adolin. I think in many ways Dalinar and Adolin's part is the most important and most indicative of the future books. But at the same time, it may have been the one I was least interested in. Well, at times it was the one. Other times it was Shallan's. But I think there's a lot of good things done in there, a lot of good setup, but at the same time, I feel like some parts felt a little repetitive or unnecessary. And I mean, Sanderson does that in all of his books and all of the parts, but mostly I felt it a lot in sometimes here. I think the stuff with Elkar's saddle was kind of useless. And yeah, but overall, I think done really well. A lot of interesting things. Mainly the stuff with the visions, the Alethi as a whole I find pretty interesting. All their customs and the way they live their lives. I think the Shattered Plains is a great, interesting environment. The Parshendi are interesting. There's so much good stuff happening there, but I think some of it was a little drawn out at times. So, what do I think overall? Overall, I think could have been cut down some parts a little bit more. The writing was okay, but it's average. I think the writing is average, maybe a little bit above average, but I think the writing is about average, which really takes down the score. But the rest of the elements are done really well. I think Sanderson is a great author, especially he's good at writing likable, nuanced characters. He's good at, not as nuanced as I would like, but he's good at writing a good amount of nuance, especially in Stormlight Archive. His world is wonderful. I think this is definitely a great book for the world because he doesn't go too in depth to the point where it would bore people or what we don't need. He doesn't go too much into what we don't need in this book. This book is mostly about what we need for the world, and I think it does a great job there. And then the characters, amazing. The pacing is really good. I think, yeah, the writing is the only thing that really takes it down, but that's true for all of his books. So I think I'm going to score this at an 8.75 out of 10, mainly because I think Sanderson's best gets up to like 9.25, but or at least for me it does. But my biggest problem isn't even a problem because, like I said, 8.5, I love this book. But my biggest thing with this book is it's the first. I don't tend to love a first book in the series as much because I like the more in-depth things later on in the series, and I feel like this is a great book, but it's sort of almost like a prologue to the main story, and a lot of Sanderson does a great job writing it, but there's still so much more, and I'm not as invested in it. And yeah, it's 8.75, not just for, oh my gosh, how well is this book done, but also how invested I am and how much I like it, because no one's objective, and especially not me. So yeah, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Farewell.